Hi everyone, and welcome back to Lamppost Studios. My name is Bella, and if you're new to my channel, I am an artist and a fantasy nerd. You can find everything on my channel, from drawing videos and art tutorials to book and movie reviews, and even tips on writing fantasy novels and so much more. So definitely check out my videos if you have a chance, or leave a comment below if there is a specific video you'd like me to make. So, if you're a Lord of the Rings nerd like me, you've probably eagerly awaited the release of the new movie War of the Rohirrim, just released on December 13th. I had meant to release this video a few weeks ago, but some things came up and I was not able to do it until now, so I do apologize about that. But I got to go see the movie on opening day, and that was really fun, so I'm really excited to share my thoughts and experiences with you today about this new movie. I'll talk through each of the different aspects of this film, such as the background, plot, characters, visuals, soundtrack, and analyzing each of these and sharing my thoughts and opinions with you all. I tried to spoil as little as possible, so just know I haven't spoiled anything major, but if you don't want any kind of spoilers at all, then you might not want to watch this video right now and wait until after you've seen the movie. But let's get to it. So, a basic overview of this movie. The title is The Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim. Director is legendary Kinji Kamiyama. It's produced by New Line Cinema, Warner Brothers Animation, Domain Entertainment, and Soul Entertainment in association with Wingnut Films. They had quite a few producers on this movie, but the main ones that you will probably recognize are Philippa Boyens, Fran Walsh, and Peter Jackson. They are the screenwriters and producers for the original Lord of the Rings and Hobbit trilogies, and Peter Jackson and I think Fran Walsh were the producers in that movie as well, and Peter Jackson was the director, as you probably know. This movie was released on December 13th, 2024. The running time is about 2 hours and 14 minutes. The starring actors are Brian Cox, Gaia Wise, Luke Pasqualiano, and Miranda Otto. This movie was rated PG-13 because there was definitely some graphic violence and intense action and emotional scenes, which in my opinion makes it all better. The percentage is 45%, which was surprisingly low, but I thought it was a pretty good movie. I would personally give this movie 3 or 4 stars. The genres for this movie are anime and epic fantasy. Okay, and moving on to a little bit of background for this movie. So, for Lord of the Rings nerds who have read Appendix A in the back of The Return of the King, will recognize the story of Helm Hammerhand, one of the first kings of Rohan, for which Helm's Deep happens to be named after. That's what this story revolves around, is Helm and the battle that takes place during his time. So this takes place shortly after the founding of Rohan, and this is about 250 years before the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. This is also right about the time that Saruman became master of Isengard and his treachery began, as we all well know. Isengard also still happened to be in Gondor's possession at that time, and Saruman came there searching for the Palantir. So here's a little bit of just a summary of the movie and the story. So there was a man named Freka who was a descendant of the Dunlendings living in Rohan. He wants to be king of Rohan, so he kind of rises up in power and sort of forms his own kingdom. One day he approaches Helm Hammerhand, king of Rohan, asking for the hand of his daughter Hera to wed his son Wulf. When Hera refuses to marry Wulf, and then Helm accidentally murders Freka in a wrestling match, which happens to be a slight change from the original story, if you'll notice, Wulf vows revenge. He leads an attack against Rohan, causing much devastation to the kingdom, forcing them to retreat to Helm's Deep. Hera, daughter of Helm, whom the story revolves around, must learn to stay strong for her people and guide them to safety, protecting them from Wulf's tyranny and treason. So this is the story that you will find in War of the Rohirrim. And it's kind of like a side story in Rohan's past. So I recommend making sure that you've read and watched both The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogies by J.R.R. Tolkien, so that when you're watching this movie, you can fully appreciate the story and the characters and the settings, because there are some direct tie-ins to later events leading up to the discovery of the ring and the Lord of the Rings story, and I thought that was pretty cool. So as for my personal thoughts on the story and the movie and how they did that, I thought it was very faithful to the short account in Appendix A of The Return of the King. Because it's such a short story, it was interesting to see the other details and characters that they added to make the story more interesting and entertaining. It's definitely not as eventful as the Lord of the Rings story, and it doesn't quite leave you with the same feeling of satisfaction, but it was still a familiar story and the same familiar feeling characters, just with a fresh twist. Also, the battle scenes bring back a lot of memories of the Battle of Helm's Deep and the Two Towers, so I thought that was pretty cool. Alrighty, now it's time to move on to character analysis. So I thought the characters were pretty cool. They were the same characters as in the original story, just with added backstories and of course a little more of a personality. Hera is the main character. She's the daughter of Helm. She is your classic headstrong, rebellious girl. The story follows from her perspective most of the time. I do feel like a little more depth could have been added to her character, more layers to her personality. And I understand that there's not always time to do that in films, but her character felt a little distant and not super easy to relate to at times. But overall, she was pretty cool. So something that I kind of appreciated here with Hera's character is that it seemed to me that they didn't try to push the strong female character agenda too hard, kind of like I thought they were going to. And I know people probably have different opinions on this, and that's perfectly fine. These are my opinions, and I'd love to hear your own thoughts. Just keep in mind to keep your comments kind and respectful. But let me explain what I mean. So, feminism and the strong female character stereotype I find majorly annoying and really overrated. But it's always the same. There are these headstrong, independent, sexy girls, and they have terrible and predictable personalities. They're majorly lacking in good character arcs and development. They're selfish, rude, come across as super snobby, but for some reason, everyone likes them or finds them like super attractive, even when the female character has obvious character flaws that aren't even treated as problems because they're just so perfect. But these characters are so unrealistic. But while I think Hera's character was a little shallow at times and a little hard to relate to, really close to being that feminist stereotype, in a way I think her character was also kind of believable in this particular circumstance. Hera lived in a man's world where women might not have always been properly recognized or treated as just as important as men. But Hera desires to be a shield maiden, women who go out to battle bearing the shields of the soldiers, which is actually in The Lord of the Rings, in Rohan's past. But Hera longs to fight alongside her brothers when they go out to battle, but she obeys her father, staying in Edoras to watch after their people. Hera also happens to discover a dangerous plot against Rohan during the battle and is able to lead the people of Rohan to safety in Helm's Deep. And she never would have been able to do that if she had gone out to fight. So in some ways, I feel that although Hera is a bit of a daredevil and eager to defend her people, she also chose the right decision to stay where she was most needed, whether she wanted to do that or not. I think these moments of restraint and obedience to her father multiple times in the film was something I respected because Hera was doing the right thing, and that's what we want to root for when we have good characters. We want them to do the right thing whether they want to or not. It's part of that internal conflict that all good characters should have. But, of course Hera does fight later on, but only because she is the last one left to defend her people after everyone else is gone. She's willing to sacrifice herself for the people of Rohan. And I do feel like they could have done a lot more with her character, exploring her backstory some more and adding some more complex layers to her personality. But in several ways, I feel that Hera was more likable and slightly more realistic of a character compared to all those other strong female characters out there. But of course, you can have your own opinions. These are just my thoughts on Hera's character. But there is one last thing I have to say about this, and the fact that we've actually already seen Hera's character before. And if you haven't seen The War of the Rohirrim yet and you're listening to me describe Hera's character, you're probably thinking, this is very familiar. Well, you're right. Hera is almost identical to Éowyn from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There are very subtle differences, especially in the fact that Tolkien was never pushing any agendas at all, like something ridiculous as feminism. But I just wish they would have picked a slightly different sort of story for Hera, rather than copying an already existing character. But I mean, whatever. It's not a huge deal to me. That's just something that I thought was kind of like, okay, this is a lot like the Lord of the Rings. Anyway, in summary, I think I was very thankful that the feminist stereotype wasn't pushed too hard with Hera's character, and that she was, in a small way, somewhat likable. But let's talk about Wolf for a second. Wolf is the main villain of the story, and he is also the son of Freka. This movie was like a revenge story, so it's pretty different from the normal Lord of the Rings Hobbit movies where you just have these purely evil villains like the Nazgul or Sauron, for instance. Wolf felt much more human, especially because there was a past between him and Hera. This created an interesting dynamic between these two that eventually plays out in the end, but we can see Wolf is in truth a coward. He forces others to do his dirty work for him while he stands off to the side, waiting for his chance to seize the throne. He cheats on those serving him, using deception to control others, causing a very shallow alliance between himself and his army, and he knows that can snap any second, causing his own men to turn against him. I also see that the audience kind of has a little bit of compassion for Wolf, just seeing that he's a young man whose father was killed, and that leaves him scared and confused, and vowing revenge against the people of the woman he was willing to marry only seconds before. This also gives the audience and characters of the story a bit of uncertainty concerning Wolf, not quite sure what he's planning to do next. At times I did wish Wolf's character posed more of an actual threat. He didn't really seem like the scary kind of villain, you're just kind of unsure whether he's gonna end up good or bad in the end. And it's kind of weird watching someone like Wolf when you're used to the big bad guys of the main Lord of the Rings trilogy, where they're just purely evil, where Wolf, on the other hand, feels a little bit more human. But in a way, I feel like that can be seen as a positive thing, because towards the end of the movie, there are at least a couple hints at two of the main villains we see later in Lord of the Rings, and it kind of makes you realize how much more eviler they are and how much of a bigger deal they were than someone like Wolf in contrast. So in summary, I thought the characters were okay, though some of them definitely lacked much depth and relatability to their characters, as well as to their backgrounds, and I also felt like, at times certain characters needed to be better established, because although I had an understanding of the story before I watched the film, I was still uncertain as to who some of these characters were and their significance to the story, but overall I thought they were pretty cool. Visuals. Okay, let's talk about the visuals on this movie a little bit, because this is anime and it's really different from your other Lord of the Rings Hobbit movies where they were all completely live action, with a few CGI characters here and there. So it was very interesting to have this anime Lord of the Rings film. It was kind of surprising to me at first, honestly, and I really wasn't sure what to expect with this, and I've never actually seen an actual anime film, so I can't compare The War of the Rohirrim to anything else, but I was very impressed with the quality and the visual effects of this particular animation style. The textures and effects like rain and water were surprisingly realistic, but somehow they didn't seem entirely out of place with the less realistic anime characters. It also reminded me of the older animation for early Disney films like Aladdin or The Lion King, for instance. And I love that quality of this film. It's so different from all the new films now where CGI and computer graphics are so realistic that it's almost not even interesting anymore to watch movies that are made in, with CGI and that kind of stuff, because they overuse it so often that it's really nothing new. So this was kind of like a breath of fresh air, just seeing this whole new animation style that just seems so different from what you normally watch. So I really, really like that. I loved the visuals. And as an artist, I was studying, how they created these characters and just you know, how they did all these textures and all that kind of stuff. And so that was very entertaining for me personally to just see how they drew all these characters, and that was just really fun. So overall, I loved the visuals. It was really cool. And honestly, you do kind of forget after a while that it's animation. You know, you just kind of completely forget. And the battle scenes remind you so much of the Two Towers and the whole battle at Helm's Deep, and you just kind of forget and you just get lost in this whole world. So I thought they did that really well. The music. Okay. The music for this film was composed by Stephen Gallagher, and I loved the music. Right off the bat, when the movie first began, you immediately hear the familiar themes of The Ring and the Rohan themes, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is so exciting. And the main theme for The War of the Rohirrim is very strongly influenced by the original Rohan theme. You can really hear that throughout the movie, which just adds so much to that Middle-earth feel, reminding you that this story is not that far away from what we're normally familiar with. And that's what I thought was so cool. I mean, the music of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are just so recognizable. They're so classic, and I mean, you can hear it and be like, oh my goodness, yeah, that's totally Howard Shore, that's The Lord of the Rings. And so I thought that was really cool that they were able to find another composer who was able to make music that sounds so familiar and just, you know, so much to the world of Middle-earth that it just takes you there immediately, and you're like, oh wow, this is so cool. So I thought the music was absolutely great. Okay, we're finally getting to the end of this. So here's my final thoughts on this movie. I thought this movie was way better than I was expecting. I thought it would be kind of weird since it was going to be anime, and they hardly had any story to go off of. You know, in the account in Appendix A of The Return of the King, I was like, I don't know what they're gonna do with this, but, you know, hopefully it'll be somewhat interesting. And I was also expecting it to be completely trashed up with feminism and who knows what else. But I thought the visuals, the soundtrack, the story, and the characters, they all blended so well together into a beautiful new story that takes place in Middle-earth, with things that are both familiar, but also unique and interesting. Although this film will never be as good as the originals, and it doesn't quite leave you with that same feeling of satisfaction, and there are some things I would change about it, I thought it was very well done. It was a delightful experience to go back to the world of Middle-earth and explore a whole new point in time and the rich history that Tolkien has created for his world. Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens have done it once again, and I hope that this is good news for the 2 upcoming Lord of the Rings films planned for the future. I hope that they will continue to stay faithful to the world of Middle-earth and the life work of J.R.R. Tolkien, unlike The Rings of Power has done. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on this new film. If you have seen this movie already and want to share your own thoughts and opinions, please leave a comment below. Just be careful of spoilers for those who have not seen it yet. Also, make sure to like and subscribe, check out my channel for other related content, and I hope you have a beautiful and blessed day.